The morning of May 6, 1943. The North Atlantic, 200 miles southwest of Iceland. Commander James Harrison stands on the bridge of the destroyer USS Benson, his hands gripping the rail as 43 merchant ships spread across 12 square miles of grey ocean steam toward Britain, with supplies that could decide whether the war is won or lost. His orders are simple: keep them alive for 6 more days until they reach Liverpool. But in the conning tower behind him sits a device that shouldn't matter, a clock, not for telling time, but for preventing death. In exactly 4 minutes, an alarm will sound, and every ship in this convoy will turn 25 degrees to starboard in perfect unison, following an invisible pattern across the sea that has confused German U-boat commanders for 26 years. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Harrison checks his watch. 3 minutes, 42 seconds. Below deck, in 38 different merchant vessels scattered across the formation, sailors watch identical clocks mounted on their bridges, small brass instruments, no bigger than a dinner plate with metal pegs arranged around the rim like teeth on a gear. When the minute hand sweeps past the next peg, buzzers will sound on 43 ships simultaneously, and 43 captains will order course changes they've never discussed over radio, never confirmed with signal flags, never coordinated except through the silent language of synchronized time. The Germans call it ghost maneuvering. The Kriegsmarine's most experienced U-boat aces describe watching convoys that seem to read their minds, zigging left precisely when the torpedo firing solution demands they continue straight, zagging right exactly when the submarine's attack computer calculates they should maintain course. What the Germans don't understand, what they can't see from their periscopes scanning the horizon, is that destroyer captains aren't reading minds, they're reading clocks. The mathematics of death is brutally simple. A Type 7 U-boat sits 3,000 yards from its target. The submarine commander peers through his attack periscope, watches a merchant ship's silhouette cross the graticule in his lens. His first watch officer operates the Torpedo Vorhaltrechner, the electromechanical computer manufactured by Siemens that can solve the torpedo triangle in seconds. Target bearing, 270 degrees. Target speed, 12 knots. Angle on bow, 90 degrees port. The machine calculates the precise moment to fire, the exact gyro angle that will send the torpedo on an intercept course with mathematical certainty. Range, closing to optimal firing position at 2,800 yards. The submarine commander's finger hovers over the firing button. 2,600 yards. The merchant ship maintains a steady course, predictable as clockwork. 2,400 yards. Perfect geometry. The Vorhaltrechner solution holds steady at 98% confidence. 2,200 yards. The commander prepares to give the order, fire Torpedo 1, and then the convoy turns. Not a few degrees of random wandering, 25 degrees to starboard, 43 ships simultaneously, as if controlled by a single mind. Vorhaltrechner's solution collapses. Target angle changes from 90 degrees to 65 degrees. Range rate changes. The firing triangle dissolves into chaos. By the time the first watch officer can input new data, recalculate the solution, the convoy has been on the new course for 30 seconds. The submarine commander orders ahead full, trying to reposition for a new attack angle. His diesels thunder in the cold Atlantic water, but the destroyer escorts zigzag outward from the convoy's main body, their sonar pinging, searching, forcing the U-boat to dive to avoid detection, and at the moment the submarine submerges, its speed drops from 17 knots to 7. The convoy pulls away at 12 knots, opening the range every minute. The attack fails. Not because of superior firepower, not because of better armor. The attack fails because of time. December 7th, 1941. The same day Japanese bombers destroy the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Harrison stands in a classroom at the destroyer school in Newport, Rhode Island, studying diagrams that will save his life in ways he can't yet imagine. The instructor, a lieutenant commander who spent 9 months escorting convoys across the Atlantic before America entered the war, draws 2 lines on the blackboard, one straight, one zigzag. A submarine needs 3 pieces of information to achieve a firing solution, the instructor explains. Target bearing, target speed, target course. With those 3 numbers fed into a torpedo data computer or a German Vorhaltrechner, a submarine can calculate the precise moment and angle to fire a torpedo that will intersect the target's future position. The torpedo travels at 46 knots. The target travels at 12. Simple geometry, inevitable mathematics. Unless the target's course changes unpredictably, the instructor taps the zigzag line with his chalk. If a convoy maintains a straight course, he continues, any submarine that achieves bearing on the formation can calculate a firing solution and hold it for minutes at a time. Plenty of time to maneuver into position, verify calculations, fire a full spread of torpedoes. But if the convoy changes course every 3 to 5 minutes, using predetermined patterns that the submarine commander cannot predict, every firing solution becomes obsolete the moment it's calculated. The classroom falls silent as 40 destroyer captains contemplate the implications. German U-boats sink Allied merchant ships at a rate that threatens Britain's survival. 500,000 tons per month. 600,000. November 1942, the number will reach 700,000 tons, more ships destroyed than American and British shipyards can replace. At this rate, Britain will run out of fuel oil by March 1943. Out of food by May. The war will end not with invasion, but with starvation and surrender. Harrison raises his hand. Does zigzagging work, sir? The instructor's expression hardens. Sometimes. When executed properly with tight timing and disciplined course changes at angles of 20 to 40 degrees, zigzagging increases the difficulty of achieving a torpedo firing solution by a factor of 4. Submarines report numerous failed attacks against convoys that maintained proper zigzag patterns. But, and the instructor pauses here, letting the word hang in the air like a depth charge waiting to detonate, zigzagging also increases the risk of collision within the convoy, extends the total distance travelled, which keeps ships longer in the danger zone, and requires absolute discipline from merchant captains who must change course simultaneously, without radio communication or signal flags that might alert lurking submarines. The key to survival lies not in the complexity of the pattern, but in the precision of its execution. Ships must turn together, not close together, within seconds of each other, across 12 square miles of ocean, in storms, in fog, in darkness, without speaking. Harrison looks at the diagram on the blackboard, the zigzag line that represents life, and the straight line that represents death, and understands that everything depends on a clock. The zigzag concept emerged in 1917, when German U-boats nearly starved Britain into surrender during the First Global War. British Admiralty officials, desperate to protect merchant shipping from submarine attack, developed systematic evasion patterns that forced convoys to change course at irregular intervals. The theory was sound. If submarines couldn't predict a target's future position, they couldn't calculate an accurate firing solution, but the execution proved nearly impossible. Early attempts at zigzagging created chaos, merchant ships using different interpretations of flag signals, captains changing course at different times based on pocket watches that weren't synchronized, convoys that began in formation arriving scattered across hundreds of miles of ocean, individual vessels easy prey for waiting U-boats. The British needed a way to coordinate 40 or 50 ships simultaneously without radio transmission that German listening posts could intercept, without signal flags that submarines' periscopes could observe, without any communication that might reveal when the next course change would occur. They needed perfect coordination achieved through perfect silence. The solution arrived in the form of a clock, not a standard timepiece, but a specialized instrument designed by British horologists working with Admiralty tactical experts. A brass mechanism, 18 inches in diameter, mounted in a mahogany case, the clock face showed standard hours and minutes, but around the rim, small movable metal pegs could be positioned at specific intervals. When the clock's single hand swept past a peg, an electrical circuit closed, triggering a buzzer mounted elsewhere on the bridge. The buzzer sounded. The captain ordered a course change. Every ship in the convoy heard the same buzzer at the same moment, because every ship carried an identical clock wound to identical time. They called it a convoy clock. Later, historians would call it the zig-zag clock, the device that made ghost maneuvering possible. By 1918, the British had refined zigzag patterns into a science. Different numbered plans for different situations. Zigzag number 1 for high-speed convoys capable of 16 knots or faster. Zigzag number 7 for slow merchant convoys making 9 knots. Zigzag number 12 for convoys in extreme danger, with course changes every 2 to 3 minutes at angles up to 40 degrees. Each pattern specified the base course, the deviation angles, the duration of each leg, the sequence of turns. The plans were printed in confidential publications distributed to convoy commodores and merchant captains. Before sailing, the convoy commodore would signal which zigzag pattern would be implemented, often changing patterns daily or even multiple times per day to prevent German intelligence from predicting the schedule. The beauty of the system lay in its simplicity. No radio transmission, no light signals, no flags, just synchronized time and pre-agreed patterns that existed only on paper locked in the captain's safe. When America entered the Great War in 1917, the US Navy adopted British zigzag procedures wholesale, recognizing that escort tactics developed through bitter experience couldn't be improved by theoretical revision. American destroyer captains learned to read zigzag clocks, to anticipate course changes, to position their escorts outside the convoy's main body, where they could respond to submarine contacts without interfering with merchant ship movements. The system worked. Convoy losses decreased even as U-boat numbers increased. But after the armistice in November 1918, as wartime urgency faded into peacetime complacency, the lessons of convoy protection faded with it. Zigzag clocks disappeared into naval warehouses. Tactical publications gathered dust. Training exercises emphasized fleet actions and surface engagements, not the unglamorous work of shepherding merchant ships across dangerous waters. By September 1939, when German U-boats returned to the Atlantic hunting British convoys, a generation of destroyer captains had to relearn tactics their predecessors had perfected at terrible cost 20 years earlier. Harrison graduates from destroyer school in February 1942 and receives orders to USS Benson, a new Fletcher-class destroyer assigned to convoy escort duty between New York and Iceland. His first convoy departed Hampton Roads in March, with 32 merchant ships carrying aviation fuel, ammunition, and tinned food. The convoy commodore, a retired Royal Navy Vice Admiral recalled to service, briefs the escort commanders before sailing. "Gentlemen," he begins, his accent clipped and precise, "we shall implement zigzag number 8 upon clearing the swept channel. The course changes every 15 minutes at angles between 20 and 35 degrees. The pattern continues until we pass 60 degrees west longitude, at which point we revert to straight steaming to maximize speed of advance." Questions? Harrison has dozens of questions. How do merchant captains know when to turn without radio orders? How do ships maintain formation while continuously changing course? What happens if a ship's zigzag clock fails? But the convoy commodore's expression suggests these questions reveal ignorance that should embarrass any officer claiming readiness for Atlantic duty. So Harrison stays silent and resolves to learn through observation. The convoy forms up slowly, merchant ships taking positions in columns spaced 1,000 yards apart, 6 ships per column. Benson takes station 3,000 yards ahead of the formation, positioned to detect submarines attempting to infiltrate the convoy's path. The zigzag clock on Benson's bridge has been wound and synchronized with the Commodore's clock before sailing, its pegs positioned according to the confidential zigzag publication that specifies pattern number 8. At 0800 hours, as the convoy clears the submarine net marking the edge of the swept channel, the buzzer sounds. Harrison orders the right standard rudder. Benson heels into a turn, her bow swinging 28 degrees to starboard off the base course. Behind her, across 12 square miles of ocean, 32 merchant ships execute identical turns within seconds of each other. The formation holds. No confusion, no scattered vessels. Perfect synchronization achieved through silent machinery. Harrison stands on Benson's bridge, watching the merchant convoy maintain formation despite continuous course changes, marveling at coordination that seems almost supernatural until he understands the mechanism behind it. Every 15 minutes, the buzzer sounds. Every 15 minutes, the ships turn. Left, then right, then left again, following a pattern only they know, invisible to any observer without access to the confidential publication specifying Zig-Zag number 8. The convoy weaves across the Atlantic like a school of fish responding to predators they cannot see but know are hunting. For 6 days, the pattern continues. The buzzer sounds, the ships turn, the ocean remains empty except for grey waves and grey sky, and the grey hulls of merchant vessels carrying materials of survival to a nation fighting for existence. On the 7th day, as the convoy approaches Iceland, Harrison sees his first U-boat, not the submarine itself, but the evidence of its presence. A periscope wake cutting through the surface 2,000 yards off the starboard beam, visible for only seconds before disappearing back into the depths. Harrison orders flank speed, charges toward the contact point, drops a pattern of depth charges that erupt in towers of white water. He has no confirmation of a kill, no oil slick, no debris, but the periscope doesn't reappear, and the convoy steams on unmolested. Later, reading the after-action report, Harrison realizes the timing. The U-boat had achieved a favorable position for an attack. Then, the zigzag buzzer sounded. The convoy turned. The firing solution collapsed. The submarine commander exposed his periscope, trying to reacquire the target. Benson's lookouts spotted the wake. The U-boat was forced to crash, dive, and abandon the attack. The mathematics of time had favored the defender. This time. But Harrison learns quickly that zigzagging creates problems as deadly as the submarines it's meant to evade. May 1942, northbound convoy 40 ships, including the Liberty ship John Doe carrying high-octane aviation fuel. Fog descends mid-Atlantic, reducing visibility to 200 yards. The convoy maintains zigzag pattern number 5 despite the conditions. The course changes every 10 minutes to prevent U-boats from using hydrophone bearings to calculate intercept positions. At 2100 hours, the zigzag buzzer sounds. 40 ships turn simultaneously into fog, so thick their navigation lights can't penetrate beyond one ship length. The Liberty ship in column 3, row 4, her captain following the prescribed course change, emerges from a fog bank to find another merchant ship directly ahead, already executing the same turn from a different starting position. "Full eastern emergency," the captain shouts. But Liberty ships loaded with fuel don't stop quickly. The collision occurs at a combined closing speed of 8 knots, not violent by wartime standards, merely catastrophic. The Liberty ship's bow crumples, the other vessel's hull plates buckle. Neither ship sinks immediately, but both are crippled, falling behind the convoy's formation, wallowing dead in the water while their crews attempt emergency repairs in darkness and fog with U-boats prowling somewhere in the surrounding ocean. Benson detaches from the convoy screen to provide protection for the damaged vessels. Harrison circles the cripples at 12 knots, his sonar pinging, searching for submarine contacts that might be drawn to easy targets. For 8 hours, the 3 ships maintain position while merchant crews patch hull plates and restart flooded engine rooms. Just before dawn, both damaged vessels reported being capable of making 8 knots. Benson shepherds them westward toward Halifax, abandoning the convoy they were supposed to protect, hoping to reach port before U-boats find them. They make it, barely. But Harrison writes in his patrol report that zigzagging in fog creates collision risks that may exceed the submarine threat it's meant to counter. The assessment earns him a terse reply from the convoy commodore. Zigzag patterns will continue to be implemented regardless of visibility conditions. Collisions are preferable to torpedo strikes. Damaged ships can potentially be repaired. Sunken ships cannot. The mathematics supports the commodore's position, though Harrison finds the calculation brutal. In 1942, German U-boats sank over 6 million tons of Allied merchant shipping in the Atlantic. Collision damage in the convoy accounts for approximately 40,000 tons. The ratio is 150 to 1. Zig-zagging causes collisions, but submarines cause catastrophe. Still, Harrison develops tactics to minimize the risks. When fog descends, Benson takes station directly astern of the convoy, burning calcium flares that create faint reference points for merchant ships following behind. Other destroyers positioned themselves on the convoy's flanks, their searchlights pointed away from the formation, creating dim halos in the fog that helped captains maintain awareness of the convoy's boundaries. The modifications help. Collision rates decrease. But the fundamental problem remains. 40 ships covering 12 square miles of ocean, executing simultaneous course changes in conditions where they cannot see each other, requires faith that borders on the supernatural. Faith in synchronized clocks, faith in predetermined patterns, faith that the mathematics of time will favor survival over annihilation. September 1942 brings Harrison his first major submarine contact. Convoy of 52 ships, westbound from Liverpool, carrying evacuated children and empty holds that will be filled with American tanks and artillery. The convoy implements zig-zag pattern number 12, an extreme evasion pattern with course, changes every 3 minutes at angles up to 40 degrees. The pattern is exhausting for helmsmen who must maintain precise courses for short intervals before executing sharp turns. Exhausting for merchant captains who must verify their zigzag clocks remain synchronized. Exhausting for escort commanders who must continuously reposition destroyers around a formation that never maintains steady course for longer than 3 minutes. At 1400 hours on the 6th day, Benson's sonar operator reports contact. Possible submarine bearing 045, range 2200 yards. Harrison orders battle stations, increases speed to 20 knots, and turns toward the contact. The sonar ping grows stronger, more defined. Definite submarine contact, the operator confirms. Bearing 047, range 1800 yards, moving left slowly. The U-boat has achieved position ahead of the convoy, lying in wait, probably using hydrophone bearings to track the formation's approach, calculating the optimal moment to launch torpedoes into the mass of merchant ships. But the U-boat commander's calculations depend on the convoy maintaining its current course long enough for his torpedo data computer to achieve firing solution. Instead, 90 seconds before the German expects to give the firing order, the zigzag buzzer sounds throughout the convoy. 52 ships turn 40 degrees to port. The bearing to target changes. The range rate changes. The firing triangle collapses. Harrison watches through binoculars as the U-boat, attempting to reposition for a new attack angle, exposes its conning tower 2,500 yards off Benson's starboard bow. The submarine is caught on the surface, diesels running, trying to regain favorable position before the destroyer can close range. Harrison orders the right full rudder, all ahead flank. Benson accelerates to 35 knots, closing the distance at a rate that makes German calculations irrelevant. The U-boat's conning tower disappears as the submarine crashes, abandoning its attack to focus on survival. Benson passes over the estimated position, releases a full pattern of depth charges set for moderate depth. The explosions send columns of water 200 feet into the air. No debris surfaces, no confirmation of kill. But the U-boat doesn't return, and the convoy reaches New York without losses. In his after-action report, Harrison notes the timing. The zigzag pattern didn't destroy the submarine. The pattern disrupted the submarine's attack just long enough for the escort to respond. Time had again favored the defender. By December 1942, Harrison had escorted 8 convoys across the Atlantic. 4 encountered U-boats. 3 attacks were defeated by zigzag patterns that disrupted firing solutions at critical moments. 1 attack succeeded despite zigzagging when a U-boat Wolfpack coordinator positioned multiple submarines along the convoy's base course, accepting that individual firing solutions would be imperfect but calculating that volume of torpedoes would overwhelm evasion tactics. 2 merchant ships sank, 1,100 tons of supplies were lost, 137 sailors died. The mathematics of time had favored the attackers. Harrison studies U-boat tactics, reads intelligence reports, and tries to understand how German submarine commanders think about the problem. The reports describe U-boat frustration with zigzagging convoys. Kriegsmarine officers complain in radio messages intercepted and decoded by Allied codebreakers that British and American convoys execute coordinated maneuvers that seem impossible without radio communication. Some U-boat commanders theorize that convoys use secret short-range transmitters that don't emit detectable signals. Others propose that Allied merchant captains possess superhuman situational awareness. None suspect the truth, that 40 ships turn simultaneously because 40 clocks buzz simultaneously, because 40 pegs were positioned identically before sailing. The Germans waste resources developing equipment to detect non-existent secret transmitters, wasting time analyzing non-existent superhuman decision-making patterns. They never realize that the solution is mechanical, not tactical. They never understand that the ghost maneuvering haunting their attack calculations comes from brass mechanisms and synchronized time. January 1943 marks the beginning of the Atlantic War's most dangerous phase. Germany deploys improved Type 9 U-boats with longer range and more torpedoes. Kriegsmarine headquarters coordinates Wolfpack tactics that position multiple submarines across convoy routes, creating attack opportunities even when individual boats' firing solutions are disrupted by zigzag patterns. Allied merchant ship losses in January exceeded 300,000 tons. In February, 400,000 tons. In March, 600,000 tons. The rate approaches the catastrophic numbers from 1942. Britain's fuel oil reserves drop to 6 weeks, food stocks for 10 weeks. The war will be lost not through battlefield defeats but through mathematics of attrition. Tonnage sunk, exceeding tonnage built, supplies consumed exceeding supplies delivered. Harrison's 9th Convoy departed New York in March 1943 with 63 merchant ships, the largest formation he's yet escorted. The convoy commodore implements zigzag pattern number 14, a newly developed pattern with course changes every 4 minutes at angles averaging 32 degrees. The pattern is designed to maximize disruption of U-boat firing solutions while minimizing collision risks through carefully calculated turn angles that account for the convoy's density and the merchant ship's handling. Characteristics. For 8 days, the pattern works perfectly. The buzzer sounds every 4 minutes. The ships turn. The formation holds. Benson patrols ahead of the convoy, sonar searching, watching for the periscope wakes that indicate submarines attempting to infiltrate attack positions. On the 9th day, 200 miles south of Greenland, everything changes. At 0300 hours, a merchant ship in column 4, row 6 explodes without warning. No periscope sighting. No sonar contact. No advance warning. One moment the ship exists. Next moment she's burning, her back broken, sinking stern first into the North Atlantic. Harrison orders emergency turn to starboard, hoping to pull the convoy away from whatever submarine achieved firing position. But 5 minutes later, another ship in column 7 explodes. Then a third in column 2. The U-boats aren't attacking individually. They're hunting as a coordinated wolf pack. Multiple submarines positioned along the convoy's base course, accepting imperfect firing solutions, compensating for zigzag disruption through volume of attacks. Harrison counts 7 distinct explosions over the next hour, 7 ships sinking, 7 gaping holes in the convoy's formation. His destroyer screen engages multiple sonar contacts, drops depth charge patterns that force U-boats deep, but can't prevent the slaughter. By dawn, 11 merchant ships have been torpedoed, 9 sunk completely, 2 crippled and abandoned, 62,000 tons of supplies lost, 400 sailors dead or missing. The zigzag pattern that had worked perfectly for 8 days failed catastrophically on the 9th because German tactics evolved faster than Allied defenses could adapt. In the aftermath, Harrison writes his most detailed patrol report yet, analyzing how the Wolfpack defeated zigzag evasion. The U-boats positioned themselves not at individual intercept points but along the convoy's base course, the underlying straight line that the zigzag pattern wove around but ultimately followed. By accepting longer firing ranges and less optimal angles, the submarines achieved solutions, and that remained valid despite course changes, because the target's average position continued approaching regardless of instantaneous heading. The zigzag pattern's effectiveness depended on disrupting individual attacks. It provided no defense against coordinated tactics that treated the convoy as an area target rather than a collection of individual ships. Harrison's conclusion is stark. Zigzagging alone cannot protect convoys against determined wolf-pack attacks. Additional defensive measures are required. The additional measures arrive slowly through spring and summer 1943. Escort carriers join major convoys, their aircraft providing air cover that forces U-boats to remain submerged where their speed disadvantage becomes crippling. Improved radar allows destroyers to detect surfaced submarines at night, when previously they hunted blind. Better sonar enables earlier detection of submerged contacts. Most importantly, Allied codebreakers penetrate deeper into German naval communications, providing advance warning of wolf-pack positions that allows convoys to route around concentrations of submarines. But through all these technological improvements, the fundamental tactic remains unchanged. Convoys continue zigzagging, the buzzers continue sounding every few minutes, the ships continue turning in perfect synchronization, because even with carrier aircraft and advanced radar and broken codes, the mathematics of time still favor defenders who deny attackers the predictable courses required for accurate firing solutions. The zigzag clock continues saving lives in ways that never appear in official records, that leave no dramatic evidence, that simply result in torpedoes passing astern instead of amidships, attacks abandoned instead of pressed, firing solutions that collapse into chaos seconds before the order to fire. The final accounting of the Atlantic convoy system's effectiveness requires analysis that extends beyond individual battles or ship losses to examine the strategic outcome. Did the defensive measures, including zigzag patterns, achieve their objective of maintaining Britain's supply lines despite German submarine offensive? The statistics provide partial answers. Between September 1939 and May 1945, Allied convoys completed approximately 45,000 voyages across the Atlantic. German U-boats sank approximately 2,800 merchant ships totaling 14 million tons. The loss rate across all convoys averaged approximately 6%. Convoys that implemented systematic zigzag patterns experienced loss rates approximately 25% below convoys that maintained straight courses, though isolating zigzag effectiveness from other defensive factors, escort strength and air cover and routing, proves methodologically difficult. British analysts at Western Approach's tactical unit conducted post-war studies attempting to quantify zigzag pattern effectiveness. Their analysis compared similar convoys operating under similar conditions, some implementing aggressive zigzag patterns with course changes every 3 to 5 minutes, others using moderate patterns with changes every 10 to 15 minutes, and a small number that maintained straight courses when intelligence indicated low submarine threat in their operating areas. The results suggested that aggressive zigzagging reduced successful torpedo attacks by approximately 30 to 40% compared to straight course steaming, with the effect most pronounced against individual U-boats attempting carefully calculated attacks and least effective against wolf packs, making volume attacks from multiple bearings. The analysts noted significant caveats. Aggressive zigzagging increased collision risks within convoys by approximately 15%, though collision damage proved less catastrophic than torpedo damage in most cases. Zigzag patterns increased total distance traveled by approximately 12%, keeping ships in danger zones longer and consuming additional fuel that some merchant vessels could ill afford. The complex coordination required for zigzag execution created training burdens and operational stress that contributed to crew fatigue on crossings that could extend 3 weeks or longer. Despite these costs, the British analysis concluded that systematic zigzag patterns contributed positively to overall convoy survival rates and should be maintained as standard defensive procedure whenever submarine threat existed. German post-war documents provide the attacker's perspective on zigzag effectiveness. Kriegsmarine debriefings of surviving U-boat commanders consistently cite convoy evasion tactics as significant factors complicating attack execution. Commander Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock, who completed 8 war patrols and sank 25 Allied merchant ships, described zigzag patterns as the most frustrating defensive measure he encountered, noting that properly executed patterns could extend attack setup time from 5 minutes to 30 minutes or more, increasing the window during which escort vessels might detect his submarine's approach. Other U-boat commanders reported abandoning attacks against convoys that implemented particularly aggressive zigzag patterns, calculating that the extended attack time required to achieve firing solutions created unacceptable risks of detection and counterattack. The German documents reveal that the U-boat command never developed effective countermeasures to coordinate convoy zigzagging. Attempts to predict pattern timing based on observation failed because variable interval patterns eliminated the predictability that such prediction required. Efforts to position wolf packs along convoy base courses achieved some success, but required accurate intelligence about convoy routes that Allied deception measures increasingly denied. Acoustic torpedoes that could home on propeller noise provided some capability to strike zigzagging targets, but these weapons entered service too late and in too few numbers to significantly impact the battle's outcome. The strategic verdict is unambiguous. Britain survived, the supply lines remained open. American materials reached British ports in quantities sufficient to support military operations that eventually enabled the Normandy invasion and the liberation of Western Europe. The convoy system, including zigzag patterns as one element of layered defences, achieved its fundamental objective despite horrific losses that nevertheless remained below the unsustainable rates that would have forced British surrender. Whether zigzag patterns specifically made the difference between victory and defeat is unknowable, as isolating single factors in complex systems exceeds analytical capabilities. What's certain is that the patterns contributed to a defensive framework that denied German submarines the easy kills they needed to achieve strategic objectives. Harrison's post-war career takes him through Pacific destroyer operations, Korean War convoy duty, and eventually to Rear Admiral's rank and command of a destroyer squadron based in San Diego. He retires in 1962, his service spanning 28 years, and including some of the most intense naval warfare in human history. In retirement, he occasionally speaks to Naval Academy classes about convoy operations, always emphasizing the unglamorous discipline required to maintain defensive patterns hour after hour, day after day, crossing after crossing. The students, trained on nuclear submarines and guided missile destroyers, find his descriptions of zigzag clocks and mechanical buzzers, quaintly historical, tactics from an era superseded by technologies that make such procedures obsolete. But Harrison notes that the fundamental mathematics remain unchanged. Submarines still need target course, speed, and bearing to achieve firing solutions. Evasion tactics still deny or complicate that information. Modern warfare's increased speeds and longer-range weapons modify the specific implementation, but the underlying principle, that denying predictability to attackers advantages defenders, remains valid regardless of technological advancement. He tells the students that someday, perhaps decades in the future, they may find themselves in situations where advanced technology fails or proves inadequate, and survival depends on basic tactical discipline and coordination, executed without the sophisticated systems they've trained to rely upon. In those moments, remember the zigzag clock. Remember that brass mechanisms and synchronized timing and 4-minute intervals once saved an entire nation. Remember that warfare succeeds through aggregated small disciplines maintained consistently over time, not through dramatic individual actions. Remember that bringing ships home is more important than engaging enemies. Remember that time, properly used, favors those who maintain discipline when exhaustion tempts abandonment of procedures that seem unnecessarily burdensome until the moment they prevent disaster. Harrison died in 1978, his obituary noting his extensive destroyer service and convoy protection record. The obituary doesn't mention zigzag clocks or variable interval patterns or the 4-minute buzzers that punctuated 2 years of Atlantic crossings. These details disappear into historical archives, technical minutiae that naval historians occasionally reference when analyzing convoy tactics. but that general military histories omit in favor of more dramatic narratives about battles and campaigns. The zigzag clock itself becomes an obscure artifact. Most examples were destroyed after the war ended. A few survive in naval museums, brass mechanisms behind glass cases with explanatory placards that describe their function but cannot convey their significance. Visitors glance at the clocks briefly before moving to more visually impressive exhibits, ship models, weapons systems, dramatic paintings of naval actions. The clocks generate no excitement because their purpose seems mundane. They kept time, they buzzed, ships turned. The mechanics are simple. The importance is invisible. But occasionally a visitor, perhaps someone with naval experience or historical knowledge, pauses before a zigzag clock display and considers the implications. 40 ships covering 12 square miles of ocean. The course changes every 4 minutes. No radio communication, no visual signals. Perfect coordination achieved through synchronized clocks and pre-agreed patterns. The mathematical precision required. The disciplined execution was maintained for weeks at a time. The lives saved through accumulated small evasion maneuvers that individually changed nothing but collectively prevented catastrophe. The visitor might understand, briefly, that warfare succeeds or fails not through single dramatic actions, but through systems of coordination maintained with relentless discipline across time and space that renders individual contribution invisible while making collective achievement possible. The legacy of zigzag tactics extends beyond World War II into Cold War naval operations, where similar principles apply to submarine evasion and surface warfare. Modern navies continue teaching evasion tactics to destroyer captains and convoy commanders, though the specific implementations change with technology. Satellite navigation and digital communications allow coordination that seemed impossible in the 1940s. Nuclear submarines operating at speeds exceeding 30 knots underwater create attack problems that diesel-electric U-boats never posed. Long-range anti-ship missiles fired from over the horizon change the geometry of naval warfare, but the fundamental challenge remains. Moving valuable vessels through hostile waters requires denying adversaries the predictable information they need to calculate successful attacks. The zigzag clock's descendants are digital systems and computer-coordinated maneuvers, but the principle, time used properly, favors disciplined defenders, remains unchanged across 8 decades of technological advancement. In December 2004, a U.S. Navy destroyer conducts training exercises off the California coast, practicing convoy escort procedures against submarine threats simulated by friendly forces. The destroyer's tactical action officer, a lieutenant commander born 30 years after World War II ended, coordinates evasion maneuvers using digital systems that automatically adjust course at intervals, optimized by algorithms analyzing threat bearing, speed, and probability. The system works flawlessly, the destroyer maintaining protective position while denying simulated submarines the stable firing solutions they need. After the exercise, the tactical action officer reviews performance metrics, notes successful evasion rates exceeding 90%, records lessons learned for future operations. That evening, the tactical action officer visits the destroyer's small library and discovers a book about World War II convoy operations. Curious, he reads about zigzag clocks and mechanical buzzers and destroyer captains who maintained evasion patterns through weeks of Atlantic crossings. He realizes the digital system he operates descends directly from the brass mechanisms and synchronized timing that Harrison and thousands of other officers employed 8 decades earlier. The technology changed completely. The principle remained identical. He writes in his personal journal that understanding historical context provides perspective unavailable through training manuals and technical specifications. The zigzag clock saved Britain. The digital system protects modern convoys. Both rely on denying adversaries the predictable information they need. Time, properly used, still favors the defender. Some tactical truths transcend technological eras. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.